Chris Phillips is not the only person that's allowed to have an opinion on SEC football head coaches. He did not ask for our opinions when he came out with his list of the SEC coaching rankings. So we're going to kickstart the show tonight with our head coaching rankings. Now, there are some certain criteria that we have. That way we made it pretty fair. The first one is overall record. I don't care what school you're at. I don't care where you've been. I don't care how long you've been in the SEC. Your record has to mean something. What do you show over your tenure throughout the world of college football that guarantees why you should belong in this category? Number 2, likability at current school. Are you on the hot seat? Are you facing pressure to live up to expectations in 2025? Have you met the standard of what your fan base wants? Number 3, stability with the program. How well are you recruiting? Are you retaining talent? Are you putting out NFL caliber players? Are you winning in the transfer portal? Are you making sure that players aren't leaving in the transfer portal to go to another SEC school? Number 4, signature moments. What's your record against top 25 teams? Have you gone to the college football playoff? Have you beaten Nick Saban? Like, that's a pretty big thing that people like at this point. And number 5, likability between us. No, not in terms of likability at your school, likability with your fan base, likability with your locker room. Do Dave and I like you? Because there's coaches that I don't like. There's coaches that Dave doesn't like. And guess what? You're going to lose some numbers because of that. Because we just personally can't stomach you. So, Dave, do you want to start this off or do you want me to? Because it really doesn't matter. We both have 16.
Hey, I'll be the leadoff man. I'll take it for
Let's
us.
go.
We'll get on base. I'm on base. We're leading 16 through 1, right?
Yeah, we already know who number 1 is, and we both know who number 16 is. So let's just knock
16. You may have some Mississippi State fans argue with it, but I think me and you are going to agree here. Jeff Lebby. Again, next year, big year for him. Just right now, I mean, who are you putting behind him? Or I should say, who are you putting him in front of? I mean, again, this year, kind of a wash. You would like to get to conference win. There's no sugarcoating it. It was a bad first year. But get Blake Shapen back. Next year's a big year. I think you got to go get 5-6 wins. And I think that'll be even tough. But you're right. Right now, first year being a head coach, about to get his second year in his belt. I mean, he's 16th.
Number 1, you lost to a MAC team. That's the only thing that I qualify you for at this point. You lost to a MAC team at home. Like the Arizona State game, that's one that I could say probably sours some fans out in the SEC. They went to the college football playoff. You lost to a MAC team that didn't even go to its conference championship. And I get it. You lost your starting quarterback. I understand your defense sucked, but I like some of the pieces that were added in this offseason. Jeff Lebby went 0-8 in year 1. There's not a big track record that we have. All these other coaches outside of Brent Venables when they came to the SEC, and I guess you could throw Sam Pittman in here, they had coaching experience elsewhere, so they have a little bit longer leash when it comes to their track record as head coaches. So I did a good job portaling in talent. He lost a lot of talent, but a lot of the talent wasn't his to begin with. So I think that it's a wait and see with him. Being 16, if you're Jeff Lebby, not a negative. 15, maybe a little bit negative at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the adjustments. It's like Scatterboo and them defensively. And again, I know he's an offensive guy, but that would have concerned me. Moving to 15, I'm going to put Sammy Pittman there. A little bit losing the fire a little bit. I think kind of getting fat and happy. No offense. It's not like a fat. It's just the saying, fat and happy. Some may think he's a little overrated, whatever. But I think kind of just getting comfortable, trying to appease the 100-year chicks of the world and just kind of collecting a check at this point. So I'm moving you down. I think you started off hot out of the gate in 2020. 2021, again, you were a highly ranked team with KJ Jefferson, and it feels like really since like the end of the 21 season, the Hogs have kind of gone down. I mean, they had flashes in 22, 23 of playing teams close, and that's kind of what it's been with Sam Pittman and them. Like, they've been competitive. They've won 6-7 games. They've gotten big wins over programs that are, for whatever reason, highly touted, like Texas Tech, and those guys haven't done anything, but they get benefit of the doubt. But Sam and them have beaten them, but I just think it's kind of stagnant. The Arkansas fans, and I agree with them, it's kind of like, where are we? It's a football program right now. It's like, we're not bad, but we could probably be a little better. But I think, yeah, you're right. I think Sam's right now 15. I think that burner's low right now. I don't know how much more he's got left in him.
Here's my thing with him at 15. I said that retaining talent is such a big deal. Look at how much they've lost in the portal the last few years. I mean, your star tight end, Luke Haas, is now at Ole Miss. Patrick Kudus is now at Ole Miss. Multiple other players have gone to other SEC programs, which means you are losing talent to schools in your own conference. That's a negative to me. And the big thing is that he's going to get a win against a top 25 team. It's going to happen. Happened last year with the Tennessee game. Could happen against Texas A&M this year now that the game's in Fayetteville. Could happen against Notre Dame. Could happen against LSU. Who's to say? He always gets a top 25 win, and then he loses a game that he probably shouldn't. The Oklahoma State game, in my opinion, one of the biggest blunders that I had this year. Oklahoma State was not a good team. They had zero help at quarterback, and yet they found ways to shoot themselves in the foot. They're not progressing, they're regressing. And at some point, you got to ask yourself, if you are Arkansas, what are your realistic goals? What do you want to be as a program? Do you want to be a 6-6 going to a bowl game every single year type of team? Do you want to be one that competes for a top 25 finish, maybe a dark horse every 5 or 6 seasons in the college football playoff? Or do you just want to be a team that somehow you're okay with 4-8 and all your resources and all your money and all the allocations and all the NIL funds goes to college baseball, goes to college basketball, goes to women's basketball, goes to gymnastics, goes to other sports. And then football's just like, yeah, we got a stadium that has Tyson on the field. Cool. That's Sam Pittman for me. He's a good dude, but when I have to start a conversation off with you're a good dude, kind of shows why you are number 15 in the pecking order. Who you got at 14?
Going to BV, old Brent Venables, I think one of the best defensive coordinators the sports seen in about 2 decades, even going back to his, a little longer than that too, going back to his Oklahoma original days, DC, obviously at Clemson, now at Oklahoma. Big year for BV coming up. Again, I don't really know who you could have put him in front of, similar to Jeff Lebby being last. I just don't know who you could put in front of him, what he's done so far, but massive year for him coming up. Hired Ben Arbuckle, bringing in Napier to be the quarterback. Got to get something going offensively. The defense hasn't been the problem, but you're not just over the defense now. You're the head football coach. It's all got to be operating in fine fashion down in Norman. So next year's a big one for him. 14th, Brent Venables. Again, big year for Brent. Big year.
So this is the first time we disagree with somebody. I like that. I'm glad that we do. 14 for me. I love you, Clark Lee, but you've only had one good year to kind of go off of. You're at 14. I think that we're overhyping Clark Lee just a smidge. Now, don't get me wrong. Had the biggest win in program history, beating number 1 Alabama. You also beat Auburn. You own the state. Like, hey, Ivy, move on over. Judge Governor is Diego Pavia. Head Governor, Clark Lee. You went to a bowl game. You closed out your year with a win against a team that went to 8 overtimes against Georgia. That eventually won the SEC. You retained a lot of talent this year. But keep in mind, you struggled in year 1 in the SEC. You struggled in year 2 in the SEC. There were some that said you were on the hot seat going into this year. I wasn't one of them. I think I know what the realistic expectations are at a place like Vanderbilt. But still, you hadn't had a winning season since getting there. That's kind of the thing that I say that is different for you compared to everybody else in the SEC, is that everyone could say, I've had a winning season. This is your first one. Even BV could say he had a winning season, beat Texas in the Red River Shootout. Something that Clark Lee can't. Now, if he continues the trajectory that he's on, continues to show that he's recruiting at a high level, he's retaining talent, Vanderbilt's becoming a transfer portal destination, I'm not saying you got to go to the college football playoff. 8-4, 7-5 every year, going to a decent bowl game, having a chance to retain talent, that's a win in my book. Massive win for me. I got him at 14. I think he can rise up this list by the end of next year. But for this year, playing it safe. 1 winning season.
Heading to 13. I'm going to go Hugh Freeze here. I'm going to go Hugh. I think he's underachieved significantly so far in Auburn in 2 years. An overall losing record. Hasn't had a winning record in either season. 6-7, 5-7 last year. Just like Brent Venables. Massive year. Those two, throw in Sam Pittman, 1A, 1B, 1C. Big year. And honestly, I'd probably put Sam Pittman at 3rd below these two guys. That's how big of a 2025 campaign Hugh Freeze has to have. Just been a little bumpy in the road. You hear his players don't really like him. The quarterbacks haven't liked him, kind of throwing people under the bus during the season. I think there's too much talent being accumulated on this team now. Obviously you got Cam Coleman. They brought in the Singleton kid from Georgia Tech. They have weapons on the outside. The defense under DJ Durkin, they gave him the big contract extension so he didn't go to Ohio State. Ryan Day wanted him. He went to Auburn, wanted to stay, and they matched that. So I think retaining DJ Durkin's big. I think Auburn's going to be one of the more improved teams in the country. Again, it's not going to take much more to be improved than 5 wins. So it's all contextual. But I definitely think they're going to potentially – I think they're going to be in that 8-9 range this year if I had to say right now. But I think as of this moment, I'm not looking at the Ole Miss stuff. That was a different era of college football. I'm grading him off what he's done at Auburn so far. Recruiting's been phenomenal, but the on-the-field results have been completely underwhelming. And I don't even know the people were the brightest orange and blue glasses could disagree. Because, I mean, we're not talking about, man, they just can't get to Atlanta. They can't compete for the SEC. We're talking about having winning records and you put in a back-to-back performance, very underachieving. And the way it's kind of gone down from a media standpoint hasn't been great either. So I think Hugh's initial start at Auburn, not off to a great start, but I do think they'll be better this year.
Hugh Freeze, number 13. Here's the main reason. I don't believe in you. That's it. Like, I mean, a lot of people can come up with better reasons. You went 6-7 last year. You put all your eggs in the Peyton Thorne basket. And the problem is, Dave, they weren't a bad team last year. I mean, if you go take out the turnovers in the game against Oklahoma, the turnovers in the game against Cal, the turnovers in the game against Arkansas, they win all three. They end up going to a bowl game. They have a shot to finish off the year 9-4. They're competitive in games against A&M. They're competitive in the even Iron Bowl now with what's it called? With Kalen DeBoer down there. I'm starting to believe that I don't think Hugh Freeze can get the job done. And I understand there's a lot of things that go into it. Like, he played a lot of freshmen that were not ready to start at most SEC schools last year. I understand there's some running backs that you have to go turn to, but the play calling also was abysmal at times. You had a 1,000-yard runner in a guy in Jarquez Hunter, and much like a guy the year prior in Brian Harsin, who had Tank Bigsby, didn't want to use the running back room. You don't utilize your best players, and I understand you're bringing in the right talent. You're recruiting at a high-end level. You're punching out names left and right that are going to eventually find their way to the NFL. I get all that. But at some point, you can buy all the ingredients and still make a crappy recipe out of it. That's how I feel about Hugh Freeze right now. I don't think that he's the right guy for the job. You're laying off the laurels of beating Nick Saban back-to-back years. That's really your selling point in the SEC, that your first year, you come to the conference after being at Liberty. You nearly get the win against Alabama, but you also lose to New Mexico State. I don't care what anybody says. You should never, ever, ever lose to a team at the Conference USA level in the SEC. Quarterback or not, I don't care.
The Hugh Freeze era has been off the trail really since their road win in Arkansas back in 23. That was really the last time that you kind of were like, that's probably his best win since he's been at Auburn, honestly. And that wasn't even a great Arkansas team, but lost to New Mexico State, Bama, and then Maryland in the bowl game next 2 weeks. So since then, I agree. I don't really know how he could be higher. I mean, unless you're one of his guys.
It may be weird, but I think he's on the hottest seat personally. I personally do. Just what the expectation should be at Auburn.
Oh,
I think he's on a hotter seat than most people give him.
Again, I think if he gets 7, I think he's back. Again, I think he may have some people roster, but you got to get to 5 or 6. And again, they should. Let's be honest too, Bear. It's not like the schedule's been difficult since he's been there. They had a home and home with Cal that he split, and then they pick up Baylor this year. I mean, it's not like they've been. No offense to Vandy and them. They've had Vandy every year he's been on the schedule. Granted, Vanderbilt was a good team.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt beat them this past year with guess who? Baba Yaga, a quarterback that he could have utilized to his advantage that would have fit his system extremely well. That's the other thing that's really frustrating.
For Mark, coming in at number 12 for me, the head man at Kentucky, Mark Stoops. Man, what kind of a fall from grace, maybe wrong term, but it's what initially comes to my mind here. I mean, built the Kentucky program into what we know now. It's kind of his own standards held against him at this point. But I think it was started off with a rocky road a little bit. Mitch Barnhart, the AD, obviously him and Cal didn't get along. Obviously that's gone now. But I don't know, it feels like Stoops a little bit 1 foot in, out the door, 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door. His coaches shows during the week or usually have some passive aggressive comments. I don't know. It just feels like whenever he can, he will leave, but I don't see the guy retiring from stuff I've heard from a personal deal. I don't think the finances are as well as people would think someone that's been in that. So I think he needs to keep coaching unless Kirk Ferentz here retires and he goes to Iowa. I don't know. I just think 12 right now, they have underachieved significantly the last 3 years. I mean, really since the 21 season, Kentucky has been down the you-know-what, really. It's either the offensive line, quarterback play is not getting going. I mean, even Will Levis's last year, even to Devin Leary, it's just nothing has worked. And I don't think this year, honestly, they may be the worst team in the league this year going to the year. And I'm not giving predictions yet, but just from talking to people around them, I mean, Zach Calzada is the quarterback. It's going to go I'm not a big fan. I don't like the trajectory of this Kentucky program, even though tip of the cap to Mark Stoops. I mean, he essentially is Kentucky football right now, but it's been going downhill the last 3 years, in my opinion, Bear. But he comes in at 12 for me.
Brent Venables, number 12 for me. Guess what? You beat Hugh Freeze head-to-head. So that's the difference maker in this one. First year in the SEC, You get a win over Hugh Freeze. Here is his record since being named the head coach in placement of Lincoln Riley. 6-7, 10-3, 6-7. So which is it? Because if this year is critical, I love the hire Ben Arbuckle. I love the addition of John Napier. The fact that you have the same quarterback and OC coming from the program before is just music to my ears. It is a daunting schedule. It is a brutal schedule. You look as soon as they head to Dallas to play in the Red River Shootout and what comes up after, like realistic expectations should be 8-4. They should be 8-4 at best. I like the defense. I still think the offensive line is going to get better. You have a full healthy season of Deion Burks. That's a massive win. But I don't know what to expect from him just yet. I still have high hopes because from a defensive standpoint, here's the bottom line. If I get to pick my defensive coordinator of any of the head coaches in the SEC minus Kirby Smart, I'm picking Brent Venables. I know he's going to get that side of the football fixed because he did the last 2 years. And he's shown you that he knows how to recruit the right amount of talent. I think that year one in the SEC was a struggle. Terrible offensive line, terrible offensive communication. They fired their offensive coordinator. It was very clear that Seth Luttrell was not the right guy for the job. So I'm not worried about a guy like Brent Venables just yet. He's not proven, so that's why he's at number 12. And I give a little bit more respect to Mark Stoops because of what he has done. But still, he has gotten you to a 10-win season. Guess who hasn't gotten you to a 10-win season in the SEC since 2015? Hugh Freeze. So, sorry. I'm going to put you a little bit ahead.
11. I'm going to go Billy Napier. Again, I think Napier's system works. It just has to – the admin's got to buy in. You got to give him 4 to 5 years, and I don't think a lot of teams have patience for that. Florida's shown. I give them a round of applause for being patient. I think a lot of athletics departments are taking that approach, cutting back budgets. Heck, there's people I've talked to in SEC programs. They're not getting their bowl bonus this year. They've just cut that back. They're cutting rolls. Again, with all this $20 million revenue coming in, folks, that's going to be a thing. So I think that's a big reason why Billy Napier got retained because it wasn't bleeding out. Sorry for being gruesome there, but it's just if it's not bleeding out, people were like, let's just see. We don't know all the rules that are coming up anyways. Let's play it by ear. Big year for Billy, too. I mean, you got your franchise guy, DJ Lagway, coming back. I think you got to go win 8 games, 8-9 games if you're Billy Napier. It's a hey, we know it's not bad, but let's go get to Florida level that we were accustomed to seeing over the last 3 decades. You're probably not going to get to that this year, but let's go get 8-9 wins. Let's go beat one of our big rivals like Tennessee at home this year. Maybe go get Georgia. I think it's just time to take that next step heading in year 4. Other than that, phenomenal finish across the board there. That's why I'd give him a little more juice heading into the 25 season over a couple of these other guys. But I'm going to have old Billy coming in 11.
I got Stoops at 11. Here's the reason why. He's the winningest coach in program history. Like, that has to mean something. He still is, in my opinion, the best coach that has ever walked through the doors of Lexington. He has 2 10-win seasons at a place that is known for basketball. He's been able to recruit talent, punch out first-round defensive talent. He's been able to retain talent from going into the transfer portal. At one point, going to a bowl game was the bare minimum, and that was a win in itself. And then it became the expectations. I mean, there were people last year who thought with the players that they added on in, with Brock Vanderbilt coming in at quarterback, veteran defensive line, they were going to be a player for a 9-win season. And again, foolish of me to be one of those to believe, well, being a dark horse is not that far-fetched. Brock Vanderbilt wasn't the answer. I had questions when it came to Bush Hamden. The big blue wall sucked last year. And I do agree with you that when you have that type of contract at a school like Kentucky, number one, it's one of the best contracts that have ever existed in college athletics. And number two, I think the other thing is that you got to start living up to the role. And I don't think he has. He still is the winningest program coach in school history. That has to mean something. And if you get to 6-6 with what you brought in via the portal this year, what you have lost in the portal, how bad your quarterback play is, with some of the games that you have to go up against, like Ole Miss in week 2 that's going to be foaming at the mouth for an opportunity to send belt to ass. To me, that says something about Stoops. I don't think that he's a great coach. I don't think he's one of the elite coaches or even an A-plus coach in the SEC anymore. But he still deserves his flowers for what he has accomplished during his over decade-long run in Lexington.
Number 10, I'm going to go Clark Lee. You already named him. I'm going to be short and sweet with him. I just think the guy's a really good football coach. I think he built up some momentum last year, got the brand out there. I think the alum is around him now. Again, I think they followed up with another bowl-type season. He's got a lot of those key pieces back, obviously starting with Diego Pavia. I know he's really close with the Georgia staff. From talking to people on Georgia staff, they were sharing a lot of game plans last year because the common denominator was Will Muschamp would go to all Vanderbilt's games because his son was on the team. And I think there was a lot of sharing notes between common opponents from a defensive standpoint. And there's a lot of respect there between Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, Chidera Uzo-Doribe, and Clark, and obviously Will Muschamp and Clark Lee and that staff. I like the momentum I'm hearing from Clark Lee and them. Young coach, passionate. I give him a tip of the cap, man. Like, goes in, hires, I think, one of the kind of changed the outcome of college football a little bit, or at least to some extent, with hiring Tim Beck and bringing essentially over the New Mexico State offense with Diego Pavia. And then he had to make tough decisions to get rid of coordinators, promoted himself, or took over the job at defensive coordinator and said, hey, if nobody else can get it done, I'm going to roll with myself. So he bet on himself. I think last year was massive. I don't know if they're going to go to a bowl game every year, but Vanderbilt is going to be a competitive squad, and Clark Lee is a hell of a defensive mind. I may be a little high on him, and I think that's fair, but I like him at 10.
10 for me, Mike Elko. Here's the reason why. The other coach that I'm going to name at 9, and they're like in the same tier, he's won a conference championship at a previous school. And the other thing is that there was buy-in, in my opinion, on the defensive side of the football last year. How many explosive plays were allowed when you're a defensive coach? That's inexcusable, especially when you're at a place like Texas A&M that brings in the right talent, especially at a place like Texas A&M that you know the lay of the land on how to recruit, especially like Texas A&M that should never be finishing in the bottom half of the SEC rankings in pass coverage. I don't mind the offense. I think the offense is going to take a massive step forward this year. I like what you have in Le'Veon Moss. I like what you have in Ruben Owens. You go and you portal in the right players every single offseason. Last year was Nick Scorton. This year it's Casey Concepcion. I think that Mike Elko, for what he's going to accomplish out there, for understanding what are the expectations in a place like College Station, he's good. But I thought it was inexcusable the way that Marcel Reed leads you back to a win over USC for your defense, an area that you pride yourself on, to give up those explosive plays and allow USC to come away with the win. I thought it was inexcusable the way that you just didn't show up in the second half against South Carolina, how you didn't show up in the second half against Auburn. And so it knocks him down a little bit. I still think he's the right guy for the job. But when you look at what his major accomplishments are, I'm still looking at what he did at Duke, and he's living off of that just for right now. Doesn't mean he can't climb up this list. Think that next year they could be a 10-win team. I'm not ready to go put A&M on that pecking order, but it's not going to surprise me if A&M, with the resources that they have the right coach. But I have not seen enough in year one to be able to say, yep, Mike Elko better than all these other guys.
Yeah, 9 for me is just who you're talking about there. Mike Elko. Again, following, Clark Lee, Mike Elko is Clark Lee's mentor going back to the Wake Forest days. So 2 guys from that perspective. Barry, you hit on some of the Mike Elko stuff. I think long-term is hiring good people and trusting them is going to be Mike Elko's biggest issue. He's a control freak, have worked with him for a year. He likes to make all the decisions. But you hire good people to make decisions for you because you cannot do it all. I think that'll be his biggest issue. And let's see how the offense develops. For Colin Klein this year. That was a big hire, interesting hire. Kind of came down to Mike Denbrock. But again, I think this will be the most weapons that Colin Klein has had in his entire career. So next year, again, a lot of big years for a lot of these coaches in the SEC coming up. I think Elko at 9, though.
I'll jump the gun. I'd say Billy Napier, number 9. Here's the reason. He won a conference championship when he was at Louisiana. I get it. G5 Billy. Cool. He won a conference championship. Guess what? A lot of coaches can't say they've done that. He also was able to flip several names over the last few years right before early signing period to come to Gainesville. And the biggest thing for me is that he never lost the buy-in from the culture down in Gainesville this past year. They were losing games in horrendous fashion early in the year. Remember that game against Miami? Like a Miami team that had terrible defense? Yeah, they got blown out. Remember the Texas A&M game? They had more rushing yards in the first half than Florida had the entire game. And there were fans that were in the stands booing him whenever he appeared on the television screen. Like, it was that bad. But they never lost the locker room. You always watch as this team came together. And then you go back to that world's largest outdoor cocktail party where DJ Lagway's hurt after Graham Mertz is hurt. And the team is still playing like their hair is on fire. That says something to me. That says that you're the right guy for the job. You just don't have the right ingredients right now. Well, he did a good job of portaling in the right players this offseason. I think that he's healthier at the wide receiver spot with Trey Wilson back. Love the addition of Dallas Wilson, the 5-star that committed to Oregon. Think that you're going to have a stable run game. It's a veteran offensive line. You've made some moves, I think, on the better side defensively to put yourself in a good position. You've made some differences over the last few years to where I think 8-4 with your schedule, compared to what most coaches are going to go through next year, that's like a 10-win season in the eyes of what the scheduling says. And so when you get the buy-in from the culture, when you find a way to get your quarterback to stay around and believe I'm the right coach for you, and you're able to bring in a top 10 recruiting class after the season that you had, knowing what's waiting for you in store, I give you your flowers. I think you deserve a little bit more praise than people are giving you. So I got Billy Napier at 9. I'm a little higher on him, and I'm okay with that.
8, I'm going to go Shane Beamer. Again, I was low on the Gamecocks coming into the season. I had major question mark at quarterback. And what did you say?
Shame on you. Shame on you, Shumate.
No, I mean, again, I think he does fit the South Carolina fan base well. Again, both Shane's got an edge, a chip on his shoulder. I think it's kind of what makes him tick, like it or not, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's what makes him tick, and I think it's what makes him motivate the team. Also think the South Carolina fan base a little bit like that, chip on their shoulder, want to be told how good they are. I think it's a perfect marriage. I kind of accepted that over the last year. I didn't know if he'd be long-term this year. Again, I think the Gamecocks are going to go back down to closer to 6-7 this year. 6-7 wins, not overall record, just 6-7 wins. But again, I think it's what you're going to get at South Carolina. 6-7. Every now and then you get maybe a 9 or 10 win. I think Shane Beamer is in a very comfortable spot, a place that fits him well. I would encourage him not to leave because I don't think the Gamecock fans want to see him leave anytime soon. Just got a contract extension from the new AD as well. So I think Shane Beamer locked in. You could maybe argue him a little higher, but I don't think much higher compared to what some of these other guys have done. But again, Shane Beamer, I would have had definitely lower heading into this past season, but definitely moved up for me. But coming in at 8.
Cool. I will argue that he is higher because if I have at 8 Eli Drinkwitz, and I get it. These are like some names that I think like all could jump somewhere into that 6-5 range by this time next year. For starters, back-to-back double-digit win seasons. That means something to me. Like everyone looks at Mizzou as the redheaded stepchild that doesn't belong in the SEC because it snows in November. Like, I get it. The dude finds a way to retain talent. He kept Luther Burden in the building. That was huge. You did get a win over the eventual national champions. Whether or not we want to say they were at full capacity, they still beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. They also are one of a handful of teams that won their bowl game against a Big Ten team. South Carolina didn't do it. Alabama didn't do it. Guess who did do it? Eli Drinkwitz and the Mizzou Tigers. They beat to their own drum. And you know what? The type of recruits that they bring in, the type of transfers that they bring in are also a bit different. Their star running back this year is going to come from Louisiana Monroe. But Ahmad Hardy put up over 1,300 rushing yards last year. Guess what? First phone call to that? Hey, it's Eli Drinkwitz. Come on into Como and be the force of the Tigers backfield. We're going to make sure that you are roaring your way to an all-SEC level caliber season. Guess what? Kevin Coleman, he was able to portal on in. Bo Pabula, I believe in him. He's retaining talent. They're getting better in the transfer portal. Their recruiting rankings have gone up every single year underneath underneath Eli Drinkwitz. And at this point, the only question that I have left is, can he do it with another relaxed schedule? They don't leave Farote Field until October 18th. Like, if you can go 5-1 in that stretch, get a win over Alabama or South Carolina, you are doing such a good job. And I got to believe right now that Eli Drinkwitz is the long-term dude. I don't think he's leaving anytime soon. I think he's very comfortable where he is. I'm a lot like you when it comes to Shane Beamer. Don't go anywhere else. Stay in Como. You're doing a good job.
Yeah, I got 7 Drink as well, so I'm not going to add much more. But I think Drink up until last year, the 2023 season, that was his first winning season at Missouri. That's wild to say. Just after last season, the 2023 season was his first winning season at Missouri. Granted, his first year was the 2020 COVID year. Drink has definitely made the program better and better overall. I do think this is a big year for him, though. He could be moving. I don't think he can move much higher, in my opinion. He could definitely drop a lot after this year, though, because I want to see the sustainability after losing Brady and them. I want to see the sustainability. I mean, you're right. He brought in he kept Luther Burden, but his next quarterback will be like, hey, was that just kind of you? You know, I mean, he wasn't even that high on Brady Cook coming into it. So it's like it kind of just happened for him and Kirby more. So I'm interested to see how Trula does as well coming over Penn State. But no, Eli Drinkwitz at 7 I think is fine, especially after these last 2 years.
7, Shane Beamer. And I won't go that much higher because if he hasn't been to the college football playoff, everyone else has double-digit win seasons or they've been to the dozen dance. Here's the thing. Dave, he's hit the over 3 of his 4 years in win totals. That's got to mean something. Year one, he had a graduate assistant start games for him, and he was able to get a couple of big-time wins. Year two is Spencer Rattler. They not only knocked out Tennessee, but they also knocked Clemson out of the college football playoff race. Like, Shane Beamer is the ultimate spoiler. Like, if your team is getting really hot, he is Baba Yaga, boogeyman in the night, about ready to pop the balloon on all of your hopes and dreams. That is Shane Beamer. Did it this past year. Beat Clemson, beat Texas A&M, should have probably beaten LSU if the Nicky Manwari interception decides to count. He was able to get his team to play underneath his type of persona. And I agree with you. Why go anywhere else where you're at is really good? South Carolina, in my opinion, should be a team that every single year competes for 8 wins. Every 3 or 4 years competes for 10 and 11 wins. Makes the college football playoff because if they have a culture and an identity, they have an atmosphere, and they have a fan base that is willing to put its money where its mouth is. They got the quarterback. I like the additions that they brought in via the portal. They're not big-time names, but you talk to people in the industry, they fit the Shane Beamer kind of Clayton White culture that they've established the last few years. I like Mike Shula working with a guy like in the Norris Sellers just because of his background with mobile quarterbacks. I'm not ready to go ahead and say that Shane Beamer is a top 5 head coach in in the SEC. What I will say is, much like you, he is the biggest riser for me. And I think that the best is still ahead for him out in Columbia.
Bear calling top 5 potentially for the Beam team.
I'm going to put my money on where my mouth is. I am.
I mean, maybe if they go match 9 wins again, though. I mean, Heupel, I would still put. I'd still have Heupel unless Beamer goes to a playoff. At least Heupel has a playoff, and then go
Heupel at 6, right?
Number 6. I'm going Josh Heupel. Heupel, give him credit. I think he's taken the Tennessee program back to kind of where they're accustomed to being, but it's time to go take that next step. And it's wild to say from a playoff perspective. I mean, they did make it from a playoff perspective, but again, Josh Heupel on the road. Great teams go win on the road. That's that next step. You have to go beat other good teams on the road to become a premier team in this. I mean, you've seen it. Texas, Alabama, Georgia have all done it. LSU throughout the years have done it. Tennessee has not done that, and that is his next big step to me. That is what's concerned. They have been no-shows over the past really 3 years at times in Tuscaloosa, in Gainesville, in Athens, in games in Columbus. I mean, again, not easy places to play, not places people go win often. But when Tennessee's comparing themselves to teams like Alabama and Georgia, as they should, and Florida, as they should, you have to start winning those type of games. I think everybody's already there. Tennessee's in that top group of teams in the SEC right now, but they're not on that elite level yet because they haven't done elite things. I think Heupel's been figured out a little bit offensively. Nico didn't improve throughout the year. That has me a little concerned. Again, not long-term for Josh Heupel. I think he's got a high floor, 8 wins each year, but from a national title perspective, he's got to get it going. Competing for an SEC perspective, he's got to get it going, and it all starts with showing up on the road. And it starts with Nico improving next year. So I got Josh Heupel at 6.
Heupel's at 6 for me, but let me ask you, do you know the last time that Tennessee has had a coach that had 2 10-win seasons during his tenure in Knoxville? Do you know?
Philip
Fulmer.
Yeah.
So we've gone through a laundry list of coaches who have not been able to get to 10 wins at a program that puts in the money, that puts in the resources, that also has one of the best fan bases in college football. I don't care about Vol's Twitter. Vol's Twitter is exactly what makes college football a blessing. It's what makes the sport so unique. It's what makes the sport on the same level when people are like, oh, the Premier League is different. Go to a college football game in the SEC on a Saturday afternoon, and I promise you, that same hostility you feel when you're against Liverpool and Manchester, you'll feel that in Knoxville and Tuscaloosa. I promise you. He's got 10 wins. He's had the number 1 scoring offense 1 year. He's also had the number 1 passing attack in multiple seasons. He's also been one of the most complete coaches when his offense is humming. My question is, can we get back to that offense on the same vicinity that it was back in 2022 with Hendon Hooker? They can run the football extremely well. I love what they've done over the last few years with Jalen Wright, with Dylan Sampson. I thought Dylan Sampson was a snub for the Doak Walker Award. Absolutely should have at least been a finalist that year. I think with Nico, you knew that this wasn't the year he was supposed to take that step forward. But I do wonder, can you get to that next level? David, you seen their schedule? Like they honestly, if Nico takes that next step forward, should be right back in the college.
Their schedule since Heupel's been there has not been difficult. It hasn't. I mean, he did, huh?
They should be in the playoff next year.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Their schedule really hasn't been that difficult since he's been there. And I think it's to the point a little bit. They probably miss Alex Golesh a little bit. You talked about what has changed since 2022. It's Hendon Hooker and Alex Golesh. You can blame Joe Milton all you want. But, I mean, again, Nico Iamaleava didn't look great this year either. I mean,
I blame the wide receivers personally, but still.
It's a group of it's everybody. I mean, again, it's that whole side of the football. It's just been inconsistent, especially when you take a look. Again, two things can be true at once. Josh Heupel was doing a really good job getting Tennessee back to the level. But now let's go take that next step, man. It's time to go do that. It's year 5 coming up, and you haven't ever really won a big road game. And before people come in, 2022 LSU, when everything went wrong against LSU from the start at 11 a.m. kickoff, I need a little more than that. But
when the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. Even if you miss the first few minutes of a game or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle until the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet win. Just visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today. That's FanDuel.com/SECU for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Disclaimer: must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, and 18 plus in DC. First online real money wagers only. $5 first deposit is required. Bonus issues with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, back to the show.
We'll go, speaking of LSU, I'm going to go Brian Kelly. And again, you can make an argument if you want Heupel or Brian Kelly over him or Lane Kiffin. I can listen to that. I think there's some fair points.
They're in the same tier at this point, I would say.
Yeah, you're splitting hairs. But I think BK, going back to what he did at Notre Dame, you got to give him credit for that. I think he did get off to a rough start, overestimated or underestimated the job at LSU, just thinking you walk in and it's just a cesspool of talent from that perspective. Yes, it can be that if you set yourself up right. Again, the 3 head coaches prior to him all won national titles: Nick Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, and most people consider 2 out of those 3 guys complete goons. So, I mean, it goes to show you anybody can win a national championship potentially at LSU. I think he, like I said, underestimated that, but now they've got the right people in the right spots with Austin Thomas running the entire roster. So I think they're in the right spots. He got Blake Baker back in. I think they're good now. I think you saw a little bit of the relapse last year because of what they didn't do in the first 2 years recruiting wise. But I think they got the train back on the tracks. I do think LSU is about to start investing a lot of money into their roster. Do not be surprised with them. I like the trajectory of the Tigers, and that was coming from somebody who was not high on LSU coming in just because I knew what that defensive side of the football looked like. But I think BK, factor in what he did at LSU, or what he's done so far at LSU, what he did at Notre Dame, I think he's a top 5 coach in the league right now.
Every single coach that I'm about to name is a top 10 coach on my list right now. And by the way, Josh Heupel, he's number 12. So right on the outside looking in of top 10 coaches in college football. Number 5 is Lane Kiffin. You know what Lane Kiffin has that Josh Heupel doesn't? That almost every coach also doesn't have at their program? The most wins in a single season. We've never seen Ole Miss have an 11-win season until he arrived. Last year, get a win over Penn State in the Peach Bowl. They close out the year. The buy-in that this team had in terms of the transfer portal, in terms of how the recruiting has gone up and how they've retained talent, on the investments in the NIL collective, is second to none. And it's why a lot of people, including yours truly, had Ole Miss not only being a good team to make the college football playoff, I had them going to Atlanta this past season because of what they had returning. That's a big deal. Lane Kiffin convincing players, Ole Miss is not only the right place for you, this is the right offense for you. There's a proof of concept that when you transfer on in, you're going to get a draftable grade leaving this program in Oxford. But unfortunately, he shot himself in the foot too many times last year, and that knocked him down a little bit. You lost to a Kentucky team that never found its way back to Lexington after a bit in a detour in Oxford. You lost to an LSU team that had questionable defensive play, and all you needed was a fourth down stop. You lost to a Florida team because of your quarterback that I believed was good enough to win a Heisman Trophy threw 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter. The peak version of Ole Miss was good enough to go on a run through the college football playoff and be the most dangerous team in the postseason. The bad version went 9-3 during the regular season. And that stems from coaching. That stems from decision making and the little things, the meticulous details, like having a 345-pound defensive tackle run to the outside instead of up the middle on a 4th and 1 is beyond me. It's perplexing. That's coaching decisions. We're letting Kiffin shove himself in the foot. But I still believe he's a top 10 coach in college football. And it's a matter of it's a matter of when, not if, Ole Miss makes the college football playoff underneath him. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon either. I think he is locked in Oxford. If he's not going back to the NFL, I don't think he takes another job. I personally believe that.
I'm going to go Lane at 4-2, not to harp on a little bit more because we got a couple other segments to get to, but I'm going to go Lane Kiffin at 4. I kind of like him in today's college football, the very transactional era of college football. I think he kind of fits it. I think he's a phenomenal offensive play caller. Yeah, again, guys, I think everyone outside of one guy on this list has holes you can poke through. Is he the most organized? No. Is he the best culture guy? No, but I think he'd probably tell you that. But I think in today's model, what he's done at Ole Miss, and again, Ole Miss has supported him. He supported Ole Miss. So I think it's a perfect marriage. Again, I'm a little bit more on board as time goes on, him staying there, like we mentioned, with Drinkin Beamer. So, I mean, I think Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss is a really good fit right now. I really do. Like, I would hate for the guy to try to even go back. I don't think this would happen. But just hypothetically, the SC job, if Lincoln Riley were to leave. I personally like Lane Kiffin. That's what added into this ranking here. Phenomenal play caller. Again, would I hire him at other certain schools? No. But I think right now, with what Ole Miss is doing, how much they've invested in him, it's a perfect marriage right now. I think he's 4 right now.
4 for me is Brian Kelly. Get over it. I'm a Brian Kelly apologist. I'm not going to be sorry about it. I will defend Brian Kelly because if you want to know why, he's one of the winningest coaches in college football history. 72% win rate. He's won everywhere he's been, from Grand Valley State to Cincinnati to Notre Dame to LSU. People want to forget that when he arrived at LSU, half the roster was depleted via the portal. And that team went to the SEC championship and beat Nick Saban in overtime. He did that. And you know what? Just like Davis brought up, he didn't understand the politics that went into that job. Because a lot of people don't understand the politics that went into that job. But he's learned along the way. Dave, do you know when you look at his coaching staff, nearly every single person has ties to the state of Louisiana now? With the hires of Lance Gidry and Alex Atkins? Do you think that that's somebody who doesn't understand what it means to be at a program like LSU, what the expectations are, what the actual belief should be? You return talent at quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier. I like what you have brought in with Michael Van Buren as a contingency plan. I like what you've brought in terms of newcomers on the offensive line. I like that you've been willing to spend money to bring in the right defensive coaches like Blake Baker, like Corey Raidman, like Bo Davis. I like that you've finally taken that money that was utilized towards the NIL fund for this 2025 class. Bryce Underwood stays home. You say, okay, let's spend it on a bunch of players to fix our defensive front. It's a better defensive unit going into year 2 underneath Blake Baker. I think it's a manageable schedule. I do believe that when you look at LSU, the expectation should be 10 wins. I'm not ready to put them there. I think it's foolish to put LSU there because if we've watched them win games that they shouldn't, and we've watched them lose games that they should have never been in jeopardy of. You got to win in Clemson this year. You have got to be able to start the season off on the right note. But still, you've won everywhere. Brian Kelly has been to a national championship. He has been to a college football playoff. People don't like him, and that's fine. But your biggest argument right now for Brian Kelly being anywhere other than the top 5 is he's a meanie. I don't think he's a good dude. Cool. He's a good coach, and he proves it almost every single year. 10 wins in his first 2 seasons. People forget he's the second fastest coach in program history to get to 20 wins at LSU.
I'm going to go number 3, Kalen DeBoer. Some may call that crazy. But I think people underestimated how there's adjustments the first year. In a situation like that, you don't ever take over for the GOAT. Again, a term I think it's thrown around way too easily, way too loosely these days. But obviously, I think it's unanimous. Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time in modern college football for sure. It's just an adjustment period. Again, culture from Nick Saban is totally different from Kalen DeBoer. Doesn't mean one's right. Doesn't mean one's wrong. It's just there's a certain way. I mean, again, Nick Saban probably would have blown the whole thing up from the get-go, and that may have accounted for a couple more losses in his first year. If we're talking about first year, I mean, look at Nick Saban's first year, 7-6. But I think sometimes, like, it's going back to the Ray Perkins days. Alabama fans can remember when Ray Perkins took over for Bear Bryant. He took down the tower that Bear Bryant used to stay in. That pissed people off. But at some point, it's got to be your program. Nick Saban knows that. I think we underestimated that. I think this year is going to be a little different. I think we underestimated how hard it was going to be to take over for Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer had a much tougher job than I think we all were kind of giving it credit for. He's had much success at Washington. Phenomenal record against Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning. Had some big wins this year, just consistency across the board. That's the biggest challenge to him. Alabama fans aren't used to losing teams that are less talented than them in teams like Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. That can't happen. Nick Saban only lost to non-top 25 team 1 year. That was A&M in 21. But again, not comparing him to Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer is his own coach, some special things at Washington. I think next year is going to be better for the Tide, and I think we totally underestimated, now hindsight 2020, what he had to endure that first year. And again, it's not always just I took over a bad situation. This is rare. That's a very hard situation to go take on, where you're trying to go take over a team that just left the college football playoffs and had 17 years of really dominance. So I think I got Kalen DeBoer here at 3.
He has an 81.2% win percentage throughout his college football head coaching career. He took a Washington team that had Jimmy Lake as his head coach to back-to-back 11-win seasons. On top of that, he has his offensive coordinator that he wanted to hire from the get-go, Ryan Grubb, in the building. When you have somebody that you trust like that level, that does wonders for you just to worry about calling plays or bringing in the right talent. Anybody who says he can't recruit in the SEC, well, year one, he had a number 3 recruiting class. Year 2, he has the number 3 recruiting class in the country. He's portaled in the right players. He's built an identity that's completely different than Nick Saban, which a lot of people don't like, but sometimes change is necessary. Alabama was not the same Alabama since 2020. They were showing signs of regression well before Kalen DeBoer arrived. And he also has proven time and time again that with the right quarterback at the helm, not only is my offense dynamic, it's explosive. We punch out future NFL Sunday talent at wide receiver. Oh, and I've also coached the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, so I got that underneath my belt too. It was year one. One season does not define your career for any of these coaches. Doesn't define Brent Venables, doesn't define Hugh Freeze, doesn't define Kalen DeBoer. He has a winning percentage in the 80s. He's been to a national championship. He's had multiple double-digit win seasons, and at the Division III level, he's won a national championship. So the guy knows what it takes to win. He's easily number 3. No questions asked.
Number 2, Steve Sarkisian. I like Sark manages the whole program similar to what Kirby does. Again, went to the Nick Saban school of coaching. Sark's on the right path there. Again, I think he's got his hands in the right bucket there. Maybe he could have made a little bit better support staff hires. Again, that's just one man's opinion. But I think overall his hands are touching the NIL, the roster management, the salary cap stuff, the $20 million revenue sharing is coming. He's going to have his hands all over that, just like Kirby Smart does. A lot of coaches don't like to be involved in that. If I was a head coach, I would want to be a little bit more involved than a lot of these other guys are. Sark, phenomenal offensive coordinator. He's hired some other great on-field coaches. I mean, he's had the most success of anyone else in the league outside of Kirby Smart. I think just his biggest hole, again, and he's kind of what Kirby was early in his career. Against a guy like Kirby Smart, gets a little tight in these big games like Kirby did against Nick for a while until he got that monkey offense back in 2021 in the national title game. I think Sark's a little bit at that point. Again, it had the big win in Tuscaloosa. A little bit, you hate to say a playoff performance is disappointing, but again, I think against the upper tiers, it's kind of, hey, let's go take that next step. But again, I think it's no discussion. Sark's number 2 here.
2 college football playoff appearances. First year in the SEC, goes to the conference championship. First year with the SEC logo, gets the number 1 recruiting class in the country. What more do you want to say? Like, the dude knows what he's doing. And guess what? The best thing is he understands what are the necessities to win in the SEC. Offensive and defensive line play. What has Texas had? One of the last 2 years. One of the best offensive lines, one of the best defensive lines in the country. He understands that part. It's a matter of when, not if, Texas plays for a national championship underneath Steve Sarkisian. Now, do we have to go ahead and say that Arch Manning has to do X, Y, and Z for Steve Sarkisian to meet expectations? No, that's foolish. But from a standpoint of recruiting, retaining talent, bringing in the right talent, the wins, the signature wins, Steve Sarkisian has all of them. And you know what? You may go ahead and say, well, the playoff performances are a little bit underwhelming. He lost to Kalen DeBoer, a better and Ryan Day. Those are his playoff losses. National champion runner-up, national champion. I think you can live with that at the end of the day. I truly do think that most people can understand that is fine for what we've done year one in the SEC. But number one, we both have the same answer, so we don't waste a lot of time. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Smart's the number one hands-on. I don't even think I don't even know if you could debate it, honestly, without being laughed out of the building. So, I mean, it's Kirby Smart. Just keep rebuilding again. Will he go in the Nick Saban run? I don't think so. I think the sport's a little harder than you can't collect the depth that they used to, and that's what he complains about. You talk to people within that program, is just the lack of the ability to build the depth. But again, done a phenomenal job at Georgia so far. Again, the best program in the country right now, so it's definitely Kirby Smart.
Even though you can say he's got to beat the Alabama curse about winning during the regular season, he's beaten them in the national championship, the biggest game of the year. So it's like, yeah, he has the Alabama monkey on his back. He's gotten one win against them. He still has the biggest win, like the one that claims you are the best in college football. He's done more with less tier quarterbacks than anybody else in the sport. Oh, and by the